Hey everybody, today I'm going to show you how to tie up this cool little Nayat mackerel pattern that I've been messing around with. I'm going to start with an Ahrex SA270 hook in the vise. This is a size 2/0. For thread, I like to use Danville fine monofilament. It's one of my favorite threads to use for bucktail work, tying with Niad, tying with squinfish. It's one of my favorite threads to use. It takes a little getting used to, but it's definitely one of my favorites. Go ahead and take a thread base down the hook shank. Nice little thread base. And we're going to stop when our thread is about even with the hook point there. That's our tie-in point for the tail. We're going to start with bucktail. And for the tail section, I don't need bucktail that flares a lot. So I'm gonna pull my bucktail from the top part of the bucktail, which tends to be a little deader, tends not to flare as much. As we work down this fly, we'll work down some of these other sections of bucktail, but for the tail, we'll go ahead and use hair from the tip. So when you cut the bucktail off the hide, you're gonna have a stack that looks like this. This is a pretty thin stack. Bucktail is one of those materials it's very easy to overdo. So go easy. And we're gonna measure off our hook here. This is going to set the proportions of our fly. So measure the bucktail, get it to the length that you like. I like mine I like my flies in about the 4.5 to 5 inch range, 5-inch range. And depending on the vise you use, you'll learn what some of the landmarks on your vise are, which will help you with consistency. So if I'm tying up a bunch of these and I know that my tail is going to end right at the end of the little Regal medallion here, I can use that as my measurement point every time. So once you have the measurement that you like, you're just going to hold your bucktail butts, and we're just going to make a clean cut on the bucktail butts, right? So just a nice up and down cut. Now to tie these in, you're going to place them right on top of the hook shank. Hold them right on top of the hook shank. You're going to take 2 wraps of thread right over the top of those, and you're going to pull just a tiny bit of tension, just enough to hold the hair in place. So tension on my bobbin here. Go ahead and switch hands, and then I'm going to use this thumb to push down right on top of those thread wraps and distribute that bucktail around the shank. So I'm going to push down on the top with my thumb, and then I'm going to pinch the sides, and I'm just going to move that hair. I'm going to keep pinching, move that hair around the hook shank until I get it where I like it. Once I get it where I like it, I'm just going to draw out any slack that's in that thread, and I'm just going to do some nice tight thread wraps moving forward to wrap down those butts. And that is the first part of our tail. Next up, we're going to throw in a little bit of flash. I like a little bit of flash in my flies, so we're going to go with angel hair on the tail. Sorry about my messy nightmare clump of angel hair here. You don't need a ton here, and this can be kind of like a messy application. So what I like to do is just take, a few strands of this stuff. I like to just kind of drape it over the back of the fly, nothing too crazy. And then take a couple of wraps backwards to trap that down. You can use the same method you use when you're distributing bucktail to help make sure that flash is kind of fanned out across the top. And then once you have that where you like it, I just kind of separate this. I try to do sort of like half on each side of the hook shank. And I just sweep it back. Messy. This is messy. This isn't like a precise flash application at all. Pretty messy. And now we got some flash in our tail. I'll take my thread right back to my starting point there, which is right at the hook point. And we're gonna add one more thing to our tail, which is Nayat. So Nayat is a natural, it's a natural material, comes on a hide, and it is kind of this cool, like, middle ground between like a craft fur and a bucktail. It's stiff, fairly stiff. It's also got woolly fibers in it, so it'll hold a little bit of water, but it is really, really great for these baitfish applications when you're looking for something that's going to help you build a little bulk or maintain bulk when you're trying to build a baitfish profile. So we're going to throw that in multiple spots within this fly. It's called a Nayat mackerel. But the first place we're going to throw it in here is in the tail. And so you just cut off a little section of Nayat. You do not need a lot. This stuff is very, a little bit goes a long way. I like to give it a little comb. And we're going to measure this the same way that we kind of did our bucktail. So I like to just sort of hang this over the top of my fly. And I like my Nayat to pass my bucktail tips maybe an inch, no more than an inch, maybe like a half an inch. That's the length I like to set on these flies. We're going to reverse tie this Nayat in, so we're going to actually flip this around in our hand so that the tips are facing forward. And I'm just going to lay this on top of the hook, and then I'm going to kind of gather the material so that it all sort of drapes around the hook. And then I'm going to take 2 loose thread wraps, to sort of help pull that material around the hook. And while you're holding those thread wraps before you pull tension, same way as you did with your bucktail, go ahead and make sure that that Nayat is distributed 360 degrees around the hook. You want 360 degree coverage on that Nayat. Once you're happy with that distribution, you're gonna go ahead and take some tight wraps backwards. So we're wrapping back towards the hook point. And what we're doing here is we're creating this little thread valley, which is going to be how we're going to reverse tie this material. So when you're reverse tying, there's kind of 2 things you can do. There's hollow tying, where you put the material back and then you put thread wraps in front of it and you use the thread to control the angle. And there's something called bullet tying, which is when you reverse tie and then you push the material back and then you actually tie down on top of the material. Bullet tying is the technique we're going to use for this fly. It helps create a super durable fly. Every time you bullet tie, the material is actually tied in twice. So it makes it super durable. I'll show you here in a second. So go ahead and use a push tool. This is a cool push tool from Minnesota Fly Tool Co. Big Pen works, but this one is super cool. Highly recommend. It's cool that you can kind of see your fibers pushing back there on the inside. So go ahead and push that Nayat back. And again, just make sure the distribution's like you like it. Take your time here. Make sure everything is where it should be. And then you are going to just take a couple of thread wraps and they're going to land right in that little thread valley that we created, right? So that's what allows that thread to stay on the material there. 3 or 4 wraps there. Oops. And then step your thread down onto your hook. And then I like to go just a little bit past midway on the hook shank, and that's where our next tie-in will be. To give that tail a little brush, make sure everything is just how we like it. And now we're gonna hit it with a little bit of Zap-A-Gap. So as I mentioned, Zap-A-Gap. So Zap-A-Gap, or any CA plus glue with monofilament thread, is going to bind together to make this super durable ball of plastic almost, right? So now we've got a fly that is material tied in twice, which makes it super durable. Then you pair the CA plus with the mono thread and you're in good shape. All right, next we're gonna go back to the bucktail. And as I mentioned before, we're going to come down the tail a little bit, and we're going to use some of this hair in like the sweet spot that has a little bit more trapped air. It's going to give us a little bit more flare. We're getting to the point in the fly where we want to start building a little bit of bulk and building that profile and building those shoulders. So we're going to prop up the Nayat with some bucktail that has a little bit more flare. So once you cut your bucktail off the hide, and this pinch of bucktail is a little bit heavier than the one you use on the tail stack. A little bit more bucktail, and we're just going to measure. And the way that you really create the profile on these baitfish flies is by tapering your material. So here you can see, here's the end of my tail. I want my bucktail butts to stop short of that, right? And that's going to help us create that taper. So here my bucktail butts are stopped about 1 inch short. That's typically a little longer than I would go, but we're going to lay some Niad on top of this, so that's going to help make up a little bit of that room. So bucktail butts there. As far as the tie-in goes, same thing as we did on the tail stack. Just a nice clean cut on those bucktail butts. Lay that right on top of the hook. 2 wraps on top, hold it in place. Thumb on top to help distribute that bucktail. You can already see just by pushing down into the top of that it's already starting to come around the hook here. And then you can pinch the sides, pinch the top and bottom, pinch the sides, make sure that distributes all the way around the hook the way that you like. And then once you have it in the place you like, go ahead and pull out any slack that's in your thread. You can already see, right, that this bucktail is flaring more than the tail stack did. That's what we want. Not a ton, right? It's not like you're making a deer hair head, but more than the tail. And then go ahead and wrap forward and wrap down those bucktail butts. All right, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to introduce the color in our fly. And we're going to do that with 2 different colors of Nayat. So the rest of this fly, with the exception of a little bit of flash up at the top, is going to be Nayat. So now we're going to introduce the color. So instead of wrapping it around the hook like we did on the tail stack, we're going to tie high and low, and we're going to reverse bullet tie the rest of this fly. So technique wise, we're going to be in the same boat for the rest of this fly. So I'm going to go to white on the bottom here. Brush that Nayat out a little bit if you need to, stack any tips. And then with the Nayat, we're doing the same thing that we did with the bucktail, right? So we want this Nayat to come just past those bucktail butts, right? So it's all about taper. We're building the taper. So we want this Nayat to go just past those bucktail butts, not quite to the end. That's going to help us build that taper. You're just going to clean cut, trim those butts off clean. And then we're going to flip this around and do the first of our reverse ties. And reverse tie this. We're going to keep the white right on the bottom of the hook. So put it on the bottom, give it 2-3 wraps. Then I'm going to use my thumb to distribute it, but I'm not distributing it all the way around the hook. I only want to distribute it so that it kind of covers the sides of the bottom. You can kind of play with these fibers, make sure you get them where you like them. And you really want to make sure that stays on the bottom of the hook shank. And so once you like that, go ahead and give it some thread wraps backwards. Remember, we're creating that thread valley there. Then we're going to go ahead and flip it over. And you can actually see here, right, like that white stayed on the bottom of the hook. So now we're going to put our top color here. We're going to introduce this cool looking teal color. Now the top stack's going to be a little bit different. So on the bottom stack, we went a little shorter. On the top stack, we're going to go a little bit longer. So I'm going to measure this on the top, and I want it to go just a tiny bit past my tail Nayat there. And by tiny, I mean like less than 1/4 of an inch. Trim those butts off. reverse tie these right on the top. Same thing that we did with the white. We're just gonna make sure that that's distributed down onto the sides enough so that we have a nice clean transition when we sweep this back. Give it some thread wraps backwards. And then we're gonna use our push tool to push all that back. Take your time when you're doing this too. Sometimes this material can be a little bit finicky and want to get away from you a little bit. Just take your time. Make sure that you've got it where you like it. And then once you do, we're going to catch that with a bullet tie, 3 or 4, just like we've done the other parts of the fly. I like to throw a half hitch in here just because sometimes that bullet tie, if you really don't land in that thread valley perfectly, it likes to slip out a little bit sometimes. So I like to throw a half hitch in, and really just locks in all that tension. Give it a little comb. Make sure you like the way that the taper's shaping up, which I do. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add like a little bit of flash. I love Ripple Ice Fiber. It's such a cool flash. The crinkle in it just gives it a lot of cool like dimension and hues. So I love to use this in the heads of my flies, particularly blended with Nayat or Squimpish. This is awesome stuff. So we're gonna throw some Chartreuse in here, make it mackerel-y. And this is just gonna get tied in right on the top of the fly. And it can be messy. Nothing fancy here. This is really just adding like a little bit of complexity, a little bit of dimension to the head. So I like to give this a couple wraps. You're tying right on top of that bullet tie that you just made. Give it a couple wraps, and then I like to shove my thumb in it. Flash on top of the fly is one of those things that likes to like hug the side that you're on if you're not careful. So take your time and make sure that it distributes to the other side equally. Give it a couple wraps, and then we're just gonna go ahead and trim those butt ends off. Wrap the rest of those butt ends down, and then we're gonna walk our thread forward here. All right, we're almost there. So 2 more ties, both Nayat. And we're gonna tie it in the exact same way that we just did. We're gonna go high and low. So we're gonna go white on the bottom. So go ahead and flip your fly over. This section I've left, you can tell it looks a little more woolly. Nayat, as I mentioned, has some woolly fibers. I left a little bit of those woolly fibers in the chin stack because it just helps build a little bit of extra bulk up in the front of my fly. So same thing that we did before. You can hand stack these so that the taper is how you like it. Give it a comb, make sure it's how you like it, and then we're gonna measure this just like we have, building that taper. So we want these butts to fall short from the last ones. And then the technique is the same. Exact same as we just did on that previous step. A couple of wraps. Make sure that's distributed enough on the sides there. On this one, I like to wrap all the way up to the hook eye, so I know that's my starting point, and then wrap back, make that thread valley. Turn our fly back over there. And we'll go with our last color here, which is this cool, hard to see against my black shirt, but this cool blue color. And with this, the measurement's gonna be just like we did with that top blue stack, except this time we're gonna go just a tiny bit past tiny tiny bit past our other blue color. Tiny. Same technique. Go ahead and trim the butts. And we're gonna bullet tie those right on top. Couple of wraps. Make sure you like that distribution. Wrap up to the hook eye, and then give it a few wraps backwards to create that thread valley. And then we're gonna go back to our trusty push tool one more time, and we're gonna push all of that stuff back. Again, take your time here. Make sure that all of that material is going back like it should. Your distributions are even. And once you like where you're at, go ahead and bullet tie right into that thread valley. And then just like we did on the last step, I like to throw in a half hitch to lock all that in. Give it a little comb. Make sure you like how we're looking there. And then I like to step forward onto the actual hook, and then that's where I'll whip finish on the actual hook itself, rather than on that material bump. And then I like to throw a little bit of Zap-A-Gap here. This doesn't matter a ton because we're gonna also put some UV resin on this fly when we put the eyes on. So this doesn't have to be a ton of glue. In fact, it shouldn't be a ton of glue. You don't want to dump glue all over the front of your fly. Okay. There we go. Tying part done. Next up, we're gonna add some eyes. So for this fly, I've got some 7mm 3D eyes. And we are going to put these on in 2 steps. First step, I'm going to use some gel super glue to kind of get them on the fly in the place that I like. And then we're going to use some UV resin to just shore them up a little bit, make sure they're a little bit as locked in as you can get eyes, I should say. Take your time with the eyes. You want to make sure that the eyes are even. That can be a little bit challenging sometimes. So when you place this second eye, turn your vise around, give it a look, make sure it's even with the other eye before you really press into it to get that glue to stick. Okay, almost there. Next up, we're gonna use some Loon UV fly finish. This is thin. I like thin. Thick is a little too thick for this application for my preference. So I like to go thin here. And first thing we're gonna do is just add some UV resin kind of between the eye and the hook shank. Then hit that with your light. Do the same thing on the other side here. Hit that with your light. I like to do my UV resin in stages like this. Some people like to do the whole thing and then do the light. That's totally fine too. The next thing we're gonna do is just add some resin up here at the nose. You're gonna kind of go across the nose there, eye to eye. And this just helps give those eyes like a little bit of extra durability. And flip the fly over, you're gonna do the same thing on the bottom. Just give it a little bit of resin on the bottom there to connect those eyes. I mean, at the end of the day, you get into fish and eyes are gonna come off. They're gonna come off eventually. But you do what you can to keep them on there. Okay, we're almost done. We've got one more tiny little step, and that is to add our stripes. Black Sharpie works great for this. Also, any alcohol-based marker works great for this. Sharpie's what I have handy, so Sharpie's what we're gonna go with. And for this, I just like to kind of, I'm a lefty, so this is a little weird, I'm sorry. I just like to kind of hold that material back tight. And then we're just gonna make little lines with the Sharpie. All the way down the back of the fly. I make these kind of thin. You can make these lines thicker if you'd like. Dealer's choice, personal preference. You could do no lines. Totally up to you. That's the cool thing about fly tying is get to be as creative as you want. I think I'm gonna make these lines up top a little bit thicker here. And there we go. That is your finished Nayat mackerel. Pretty cool little pattern. Next thing you'd want to do with this is go get it wet, give it a bath, let it hang, dry, and that'll give you your final profile. I've got one here. It's the one I showed at the start that has already had a bath. But just to give you an idea of what that final profile looks, that's what you're looking at there. So you see you got that nice baitfish teardrop shape, your cool markings. It's a cool little fly. You could tie it in a ton of different colors, fish it for all kinds of different fish. You could scale it up in size, you could scale it down. It's a cool pattern. I love it. Hope you enjoy it too. Thanks for watching.